What if Faith Lehane is the daughter of Samantha Carter? Welcome back to Born into Darkness, Season 2, Episode 6, The Summers Residence. Joyce still couldn't believe the whirlwind of news regarding Faith that she had received the previous day. She had listened to how Faith had been taken away from her mother, placed with an abusive family in Boston, and then became a slayer. Then Faith had run to Sunnydale after the death of her watcher, only to have her own nightmare involving Kakistos unfold there. As Joyce placed the plates on the dining table for dinner, she couldn't believe she had never seen it. She had never seen how Faith felt or how she acted. Sure, Joyce would have taken notice whenever there was something wrong with Buffy, Dawn, Xander, or even Willow, but with Faith, she had never thought about it. The last time I saw her happy was when it snowed a few months after she first arrived in Sunnydale, Joyce thought to herself as she stood at the dining table staring at the plates. She was dancing in the snow, and for once, I forgot that she and Buffy were slayers. Joyce wanted to call Major Carter, but she didn't know what to say. I knew Faith for nearly a year, Joyce thought to herself as she walked back to the kitchen. But I never really knew her, did I? Joyce pulled the baked chicken out of the oven before walking back to the dining room. When the front door opened, Willow walked in, having finished her shift at the Magic Box, a local magic store where she was working part-time for the summer. Dawn followed behind her. "Donnie," Joyce said as she placed the food on the table before looking at her youngest daughter. "Upstairs. Change and wash up." "Can I?" Dawn asked as she pointed at the chicken, her hands rubbing against each other, her eyes locked onto the crispy skin. "No," Joyce replied. "Now move, young lady." "Fine," Dawn huffed before she ran up the stairs. She waved at Willow before calling out that she would be right back. "Sure, Donnie," Willow called after her before turning to help Joyce, who was still in the dining room. It wasn't long before Buffy and Giles walked into the house after finishing their training. As Buffy closed the front door behind them, she smiled at Willow and Joyce, who were bringing salad and bread rolls from the kitchen to the dining table. "Did you train with the new Watcher guy and Kennedy?" Willow asked as she stood behind a chair while Buffy and Giles entered the dining room. "Oh no," Buffy replied, shaking her head. "Apparently, she and Atwood have special training sessions, or something, which I'm not meant to be a part of, or something." "Atwood has new techniques developed by the Council for Training Slayers," Giles explained as he stood next to Buffy. The blonde Slayer rolled her eyes and folded her arms tightly across her chest. "Since Buffy and I aren't under the command of the Council, then..." Giles took a deep breath. "Then Buffy doesn't have access to those techniques." "But they're both Slayers," Joyce frowned. "I mean, shouldn't the both of them be receiving the same training? They're both fighting the same type of evil, just like Buffy and Faith were." "Given that Faith turned evil, Buffy began. "Buffy," Joyce said, looking at her with a shake of her head. "She was turned evil," the blonde Slayer insisted. "And now she's suddenly good again? I'm sorry, but I don't buy that. Yeah, I get that she was taken from her mother. And I'm sorry about that. I really am. But that doesn't excuse what she did here. We can hope that meeting her mother will give her a stable foundation from which to rebuild herself," Giles said. "But I can tell you that she'll have a difficult time. I'm just worried about what the council might do next." "But she's now defended," Willow said as she looked at Giles. "Right? But this can only go on for so long," Giles replied. "You see, Slayers are supposed to fight evil. It's their entire reason for being who they are. I've read the diaries of past Watchers, including those who've had to kill their own Slayer." "What?" Buffy asked, her expression tightening. "Why?" "They didn't do their job," Giles explained as he adjusted his glasses. "It wasn't common, but when it did happen, the Watchers and the Council were ruthless. Their reasoning was that, since that Slayer refused to do her job, she would be killed so that the power would be passed to the next able Slayer." "But there are 3 Slayers now," Joyce pointed out. "Surely the Council..." "The Council doesn't care if there are 3 Slayers," Giles interrupted. "If Faith decides that she does not want to use her gifts to slay demons and vampires, then the Council will make an example of her." Buffy could only look at Willow before the two of them turned their attention back to Giles. He asked Giles her life was different from that of any other Slayer before her, so why hadn't the council come after her? You still patrol, Giles explained. You still slay. That's what they want. You can go to college, you can have a job, you can have a family. But as long as you continue living the second life of darkness and death, the council doesn't care what you do. And if they did come after you, despite your slaying, they'd have to go through me. And me, Willow added with a smile. Me too, sweetie, Joyce assured her. Buffy gave a small smile. But if Faith decides to quit? Willow asked as she looked at Giles. The council may come after her, Giles answered. There are many teams like the one that attacked her in Colorado Springs. They work for the council, but their existence is disavowed. The members of these special operations teams know that they may never come back from a mission, so they leave nothing unfinished in their lives. They are also trained never to give up the council. These are very capable men and women. If they are captured, if they are tortured, they would never reveal anything. Buffy, Joyce said as she nodded toward the stairs. Go and wash up, and make sure Dawn's done washing up too. Do I have to? Buffy asked as she slumped her shoulders forward. Yes, Joyce replied as she walked toward Buffy before gently urging her up the stairs. Fine, the blonde muttered as she climbed the stairs. She walked up a few more steps before stopping and turning around. Oh, where's Tara? She'll be here soon, Willow explained. She came into the magic box during my shift. She said she'll be by a bit later. All right, Buffy replied as she ran up the stairs before disappearing into her room, leaving Willow, Joyce, and Giles in the dining room. Giles then asked Willow how her training under Tara was going, and he smiled when the redhead told him that Tara was teaching her so many different ways to control her powers. Tara's philosophy was that magic shouldn't be controlling a witch. The witch should control the magic. Giles nodded, thankful that they had encountered Tara when they did. The truth was that he had been worried about Willow's unsupervised progression in magic after her successful attempt at re-ensouling Angel. She was so eager to learn magic that was beyond even him that he didn't know what to do. He had thought about introducing her to the Light Magic Coven in Devon, but that would mean taking her out of school just before her senior year, and he couldn't do that. So, the man hoped that Willow would please herself and realize that there were some magics that she should not attempt. Giles had been there when Tara looked in wide-eyed wonder as the excited redhead told the blonde witch what she had done to help Angel. He remembered Tara turning to look at him in shock before he nodded his head. She really did it, Giles had told Tara the first night she had met all of them. Tara then looked at the grinning redhead before telling Willow that she could feel a lot of power coming from her. She needs guidance, Tara. I don't, Willow protested. I really... My my mother would always tell me that magic without guidance would eventually corrupt a person's soul, Willow, Tara explained as she looked at the redhead. She was a very, very powerful witch, and I can see you have the potential to surpass her. Really? Willow squeaked excitedly. Power is one thing, Tara cautioned as she gently placed her hand over Willow's. You need to be able to mold that power to do what you want it to do. Magic is such a rush that you have to work every day to make sure it doesn't take you over. I I have to work every day to keep myself in control. I can help you, train you. I mean, if that's what you want. Train me? Willow asked as Tara gave her a small smile and nodded. Back in the present, Joyce asked Willow to grab the pitcher of water from the kitchen and some soda for themselves if they wanted it. After Willow hurried into the kitchen, Joyce and Giles remained in the dining room in relative quiet. Willow was in the kitchen, while Buffy was shouting at Dawn on the second floor. Have you talked to Faith or her mother again? Joyce asked as she looked at Giles, who shook his head. I really don't know what to tell her, Giles admitted. I mean, I should perhaps tell her about the council and what they are capable of doing, but I'm afraid to hear any questions about why I didn't do more to help Faith fit in. Or I don't know what to tell her either, Joyce admitted quietly as Buffy ran down the stairs with Dawn. But if I don't say anything, then I'll regret it. Tara has her number, Giles reminded her. I'll call when Tara gets here, Joyce replied as she watched a bickering Buffy and Dawn walk past her and toward the dining room. Hammond's office, SGC. General Hammond had known this would happen ever since the Tolan, the Asgard, and the Nox came to him independent of each other regarding the HDC stealing their technology. He had anticipated this outcome ever since the spectacle on Tolana during the meeting with the Tolan leadership. Having O'Neill leave without informing Daniel, Teal'c, and Carter, however, caught him off guard. O'Neill had called an hour and a half earlier, asking if SG-1 was still in the mountain. Hammond had told him that they were out at Carter's relative's house with Faith. "Why, Jack?" Hammond inquired as he heard the man on the other line let out a heavy sigh of relief. "I'm leaving tonight, General," O'Neill stated heavily as he sat in a quiet corner of the bar from where he had been making his calls to Hammond. "I'll be heading from the bar straight to the mountain and then gating to Idora from there." "Without telling the team?" Hammond asked, frowning. "I don't like it either, sir," O'Neill confessed, his voice laced with regret. "But I've already insulted Daniel, and this feels like the best way to go in making them think I'm not the person they thought I was." "I don't like it, Jack," the general warned grimly. "Neither do I, General," O'Neill agreed quietly. "But I think it's better this way." Only Hammond, Walter, and Dr. Fraser stood in the gate room to watch the colonel step through the Stargate. Once the event horizon disengaged, the clock started ticking for the SGC to set their plans into motion. The first action Hammond took was assigning SG-1 to a bogus mission on another planet, the details of which remained unknown to Walter and the rest of the staff. The planet supposedly contained rich Nakoda mines, according to Tok'ra intelligence. Hammond then called Colonel Makepeace to inform him of O'Neill's departure from the SGC. He explained that he had just received word from the Tok'ra about a planet with massive Nakoda deposits and wanted SG-1 to move out first thing the following morning. Once the new leader of SG-1 received his notification, the general exhaled a heavy sigh and leaned back in his seat just as his desk phone rang. Picking up the receiver, he listened as Walter reported that a woman named Tara McClay from Sunnydale was on the line asking to speak with Carter. "Put her through to me," the general instructed. After a brief pause, the line clicked and Hammond spoke up. "This is General Hammond." "Hi, General," Tara stammered, her hands trembling as she stood in the kitchen alongside Giles and Joyce. Willow had already left for home with Buffy, who was preparing to go on patrol with Kennedy and Atwood, a setup that neither Buffy nor Giles viewed with much enthusiasm. "My name is Tara McClay. I'm calling from Sunnydale. May I speak to Major Carter?" "I'm afraid the Major is out with some colleagues and her daughter at the moment," the General replied calmly. "Oh," Tara murmured softly, exchanging an anxious look with Giles and then with Joyce. Is she alright? Faith, I mean. And Sam too. I mean, they're both doing as well as can be expected, Miss McClay," the General assured her smoothly. "If you would like, I can have the Major return your call. Or you can try calling back later tonight. We expect them to return soon." "I'll call later," Tara offered with a hesitant nod. "But Faith is doing all right, isn't she? I mean, yes," the general confirmed gently before Tara managed to thank him for taking her call. She then mentioned that she would make another attempt to reach them the following day instead. The general agreed that would be fine, though he suggested it might be better if the major initiated the return call, given that her schedule for tomorrow would be quite full. Tara provided Hammond with the landline number for the Summers home, explaining that she usually spent her non-class days there. Once Hammond jotted down the number, he set the receiver down, only to pick it up again moments later. He recognized that his immediate priority was to brief the team on Colonel O'Neill's departure, outline the newly scheduled mission for the morning, and finally notify Carter about Tara's call. Creek Apartments, 23:15 hours. Faith was about to be the last one out of Betty's apartment when Betty hugged her tightly, unwilling to let the Slayer go. "You come back and visit, alright?" Betty whispered in Faith's ear. "I have so many stories about Sammy, and I've got more family pictures. I would love to see them," Faith whispered as she held on to Betty. She squeezed her tightly for a moment before pulling back. Faith watched Betty wipe away a tear, then step back and smile at the currently blonde Slayer. "Sammy, Betty called as the Major walked up and stood next to Faith. "Once you hear from Jacob, I want the three of you back here. I think he deserves to see all the memories we've hidden away." "I will," Carter promised before hugging Betty again and then pulling back. A few minutes later, Daniel, Teal'c, Carter, and Faith left the apartment complex and headed towards the car. "You really made me listen to classical music when you were pregnant with me?" Faith asked as she looked at her mother with a raised eyebrow. "Uh-huh," the Major nodded. Her phone suddenly went off. Carter kissed Faith on the forehead before activating the line, then brought the phone to her ear with a smile on her face. It wasn't long before that smile vanished, and she came to a sudden stop when the General told her what had happened. O'Neill had left. Faith was the first to notice that Carter had stopped behind her as Daniel and Teal'c reached the car. "Mom?" Faith asked, still getting used to the idea of calling Carter Mom. I see, sir," Carter murmured as she started walking again. She placed a hand on Faith's shoulder and gently guided the confused girl toward the car. Faith knew that something was wrong from the blonde officer's expression and from the expectant looks on Daniel and Teal'c's faces. Carter nodded toward the car with her lips pressed tightly together, as if asking Daniel and Teal'c to get inside. It was then that Faith realized something bad must have happened. She saw the expression on Daniel's face change, as if he was expecting some bad news. She couldn't tell much from Teal'c's facial expressions, but his body language told Faith that he was ready for action. Once they got into the car, with Carter in the front seat alongside Daniel and Teal'c in the rear, Faith watched Carter slowly take the phone from her ear, look at it, then fold it and put it back into her pocket. "Sam?" Daniel prompted as he looked at his friend. "What's wrong?" Um, that was General Hammond," Carter explained. "Colonel O'Neill just left." "What do you mean he just left?" He left through the gate," Carter replied. "The general just said that, I mean, he just left." Faith wasn't sure what was going on, but she could see the hurt looks on all of their faces. She glanced back at Teal'c and could tell that even he was surprised. Unsure about what was happening, Faith decided it would be best to simply observe what happened. "I'll ask her what's going on when we get back to the mountain," Faith thought to herself. Carter noticed Faith looking at her from the corner of her eye as she continued to stare out of the windshield. She then looked at her daughter and assured her that there was nothing to worry about, that the colonel had just retired, and that it was probable he had left without telling them because he didn't want them to get upset. However, from Faith's expression, Carter could tell that she didn't believe her, especially since she didn't believe it herself. Wanting to change the subject in front of her daughter, Carter then told Daniel and Teal'c that they were due to go off-world tomorrow morning. "Oh?" Faith exclaimed as she opened her eyes wide. "It's not too long," the Major assured her. "Just a recon mission." "Major Carter," Teal'c observed, "would it not be appropriate for Ellie Carter to witness the Stargate?" "Well?" Carter smiled as she looked at Faith. "Want to check her out?" "Oh, can I?" Faith asked excitedly as she perked up and grinned at the Major. It was then that she realized they had seen how excited she was. So she quickly relaxed and tried to sound nonchalant. "Yeah, sure. Why not?" Carter simply smiled at her daughter before starting the car. She saw Faith lean her head against the window before she looked at the rearview mirror and caught the confused and worried expressions on Teal'c and Daniel's faces. "I'm worried about him too, guys," the Major thought to herself. Faith's room, SGC. After returning to the mountain, Carter and Faith parted ways with Daniel and Teal'c, the latter two returning to their own rooms on base. They needed to be well rested for the mission the next day. As for Faith and Carter, they found themselves in the young Slayer's room. Faith was exhausted after everything that had happened that day, so she lay down on the bed with Carter sitting beside her head. Carter ran her hand through Faith's hair as she softly sang "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Once Carter started singing, Faith looked up at the Major with an eyebrow raised. Carter chuckled before explaining that her own mother used to sing that song to her when she was a child. "And I always wanted to sing it to you." Chuckling softly, Faith let out a breath before giving in to her exhaustion and closing her eyes. The last thing she heard before falling into a deep sleep was Carter singing to her. It would be hours later when Faith woke up, having slept sprawled across her front. Opening her eyes, she found herself looking at a smiling Carter, who told her that it was time. Time? Asked a very groggy Faith as she slowly pushed herself up on the bed before wiping her eyes and yawning. Time for what? Once Faith had finished wiping her eyes, she saw that Carter was standing up from her crouching position, already dressed in her BDUs and tactical gear. It was then that Faith realized Carter meant it was time for her to go through the Stargate. Come on, kiddo, the Major encouraged as she helped Faith off the bed before kissing her on the forehead. Faith leaned to the right and noticed that the wrapped sleeping bag had been moved from one corner of the room to another, and she guessed that Carter must have slept on the floor. Noticing Faith looking behind her, Carter turned and glanced at the packed sleeping bag before looking back at Faith. She explained that she had to leave for a briefing before gearing up for the mission, and she had not wanted to disturb Faith, at least not until it was time to leave. Faith then quickly pulled on a pair of sweatpants over her shorts before leaving her quarters and walking beside Carter. They made their way to the elevator lobby, entered the elevator car, and then descended to the 28th floor. All the while, Faith glanced at Carter in her gear as the Major explained that she should not be gone too long, probably only 6 hours at most. She added that it was just supposed to be a recon mission. Carter slipped an arm around Faith's shoulders. If you're hungry, I can have one of the airmen show you the way to the mess hall. Or you can go to the gym if you want. Or I'll find something to do, Faith assured her. Carter nodded as the elevator doors opened upon reaching the 28th floor. The two of them stepped out and made their way through the hallways, passing several personnel who were rushing around as they headed toward the gate room. They eventually entered a hallway with two openings on the left side, while further down, the hallway ended. As Faith walked alongside Carter, she soon realized that one of the openings contained stairs leading up to the control room, while the other had an open blast door that led into a much larger room. Gate room. Faith noticed Daniel and Teal'c, as well as one more older man she had not yet met. Entering the massive room, Faith's eyes were immediately drawn to the large ring at the end of the ramp. Major Carter, Colonel Makepeace called. Ready? Yes, sir, Carter replied as the colonel turned and instructed Walter in the control room to dial the Stargate. Out of the corner of her eye, Faith saw Daniel and Teal'c pick up a large box, but her full attention remained on the ring. The inner track of symbols spun around before stopping, and then one of the chevrons lit up before the track began spinning again. Faith then felt a hand on her back as she looked at her mother. Carter leaned toward her over the grinding sound of the inner track and explained that the Stargate was dialing an address to a planet 6,000 light years away. The Major looked at her surprised daughter and explained that all Stargates use a 7-symbol address, with 6 symbols identifying the destination point, and 1 for the place of origin. Faith finished for Carter. The Major smiled and nodded. Faith looked at her mother before turning her attention back to the Stargate as Walter announced that the final chevron was locked. The Slayer jumped back in surprise as the unstable vortex of the wormhole rushed outward before settling back into the event horizon. That was so cool. I know, right? Carter grinned as her wide-eyed daughter stared at her before looking back at the activated Stargate. SG-1, move out, Makepeace ordered before walking up the ramp and stepping through the vertical blue puddle. It was then Daniel and Teal'c's turn to leave, but not before they told Faith they would see her later that day. Once they had stepped through the gate, Carter walked Faith up to the foot of the ramp and explained that the puddle-like effect she was seeing was the event horizon of the wormhole connecting this Stargate to another one. She told Faith that it was like stepping from one room into another. Is it safe? Faith asked as she looked at the Major. Traveling is safe, Carter assured her. It's what's on the other side that counts. It was then that it really hit Faith as she looked at the Major and then back at the Stargate. One day, her mother might die on another world, far away from her, and Faith might not be able to do anything about it. The thought brought a sharp pain to her chest as she looked at Carter once again. I've got to go, Ellie, the Major reminded her. I'll come back. You don't have to worry about that. With the pain still lingering in her chest, all Faith could do was nod silently as she looked at her mother, who squeezed her arm. Carter told her to just hold on for a few hours, and then she walked up the ramp before looking back at her daughter once again. Faith's heart jumped as she watched the Major step through the event horizon before the Stargate disengaged. It was then that she felt alone once again. She glanced at the people in the control room who were going about their jobs before looking back at the Stargate. She's so far away, Faith thought to herself. She remained at the foot of the ramp for a few seconds before stepping back and leaving the gate room with her hands in her pockets. Once she got directions to the mess hall from a nearby airman, she took her time walking there. It was 5 hours later, after Faith had some breakfast at the mess hall and then spent some time at the gym before taking a shower in her quarters and changing clothes, that she heard the sounds of klaxons blaring. Now knowing what the sounds meant, that an off-world activation had taken place, Faith hurried out of her room. She took the elevator down to the 28th floor, just as she had earlier that day with Carter. Once at the entrance to the gate room, Carter was already handing her P90 back to the airman who was standing at the foot of the ramp before turning to General Hammond and telling him that whoever had given them the intelligence on Nakoda deposits was mistaken. That planet had no Nakoda deposits, sir, Carter reported. We searched, General, Makepeace added as Carter noticed Faith standing near the entrance. While Makepeace was talking to the General, and while Daniel and Teal'c directed some of the other airmen to take the large box of specialized equipment back to one of the science labs, Carter walked up to Faith. Faith turned to her mother with a grin after Carter reminded her of her promise to come back safe and sound from the recon mission. General, Makepeace began. Maybe it's best if we go on for our post-mission checks and... I would like for all of you to stay, the General ordered. Makepeace and the rest of SG-1 looked at each other in confusion. Then, to add to the confusion, the gate activated once again. Colonel O'Neill rushed through it, but not before asking security to meet him at the event horizon to greet some upcoming guests. Upon seeing O'Neill, Faith and Carter looked at each other in confusion, as did Daniel, Teal'c, and Makepeace himself. It wasn't long before the General had security arrest the men and women who were rushing through the gate, their faces filled with panic before it disengaged. Faith watched as O'Neill strode down the stairs while Makepeace helped arrest some of the new arrivals, and then looked on in surprise as Makepeace himself was placed under arrest. The whole SG-1 team listened as the General explained that the arrested men and women would be brought up on charges of acting against the interests of the United States and her allies. He told them about the accusations made by the Nox, Tolan, and the Asgard about the SGC stealing technology. The SGC? Daniel questioned. We told them that it was most likely a group that operated outside the authority of the SGC, Hammond explained. The NID, or more specifically, a rogue element of the NID. The Tolan wanted us to capture the ones responsible, and the Asgard insisted on Colonel O'Neill being the only one who knew the truth. Given certain unforeseen events, the plan had to be carried out ahead of time, but thankfully it all fell together quite nicely. The General then turned to all the arrested individuals and told them that they would be placed in holding, and that the leader of their operation would be taken in. So, Daniel began as he looked at O'Neill while the arrested individuals were being taken away to the holding cells. Everything on Tolana was just an act. Sorry? The colonel asked as he rubbed the back of his neck nervously while looking at Daniel, then Teal'c, and finally at Carter and Faith. I know what I did for the past few days was, well, douchey, but given the stakes, well, there really wasn't a choice. The Tolan, Nox, and Asgard were going to break all diplomatic relations until this was taken care of, the General explained before looking back at the control room and asking Walter to dial the Tolan homeworld. They needed to send the Tolan a message that the mission was completed. As Walter started to dial, the Stargate began dialing in from an off-world location. Defense teams, Hammond shouted as he, SG-1, and Faith rushed up to the control room. Faith stayed close to her mother while looking out at the soldiers who rushed inside the gate room and took up positions at the foot of the ramp. "Sir," Walter reported as he looked at the computer screen. "It's a Tok'ra IDC." "Dad," Carter whispered before asking Faith to wait in the control room. Faith nodded her head before watching her mother and Hammond walk down the stairs and back into the gate room as the event horizon rippled. She saw a bald man in a tan uniform walking down the ramp toward them. She watched as the nearly bald man, who she assumed was her grandfather, gave her mother a hug before stepping back and speaking to her. Faith could see her mother's mouth moving, but she had no idea what she was saying. She then saw Jacob nod his head before walking out of the gate room. Faith heard Carter tell the man that she would talk to him after his medical checkup, and then ran up the stairs and back into the control room. "Ellie?" the major asked. "Ready to meet your grandfather?" To be continued.